"You're not wife material." That's what he said after 4 years together. Not, "I don't love you anymore," or "We've grown apart." Just those words, like a final judgment passed down without mercy. I remember staring at him, waiting for the punchline, but it never came. He just looked at me, cold, flat, detached, and I knew in that moment he meant it. We met at work, which sounds cliche, but it felt like fate at the time. Elliot was the charming new hire, and I was the reliable team lead. We clicked fast. Same dry sense of humor, same late-night cravings for Thai food. By our second year, we were living together in a loft that was too expensive but felt like home. He made me laugh, brought me coffee, remembered my allergy to strawberries. He made me feel seen in ways I hadn't felt before. I really believed I'd found the person who'd stay. Our 3rd anniversary, he proposed. Simple, sweet, just us at the lake. The ring wasn't extravagant, but it was perfect, just like us, I thought. We started planning the wedding for the following summer, both excited. Or at least, I thought we both were. But in the months that followed, something changed. He changed. Subtle at first. Little digs dressed as jokes. "You sure you want to wear that?" he'd ask, half smiling, and First I brushed it off. Everyone has opinions, right? But it escalated. Comments about my job, my family, my laugh, how I could be more polished or fit in better if I just tried harder. He said I should go back to school, elevate myself. He compared me to his friend's fiancé, fluent in French, Ivy League. I laughed it off for months, then cried when he wasn't looking, because I started believing him. I changed my hair, updated my wardrobe, enrolled in courses online. I even started speaking differently around his friends, careful to sound smarter. I gave up weekends with my sister to go to events he said mattered, but nothing I did was ever enough. There was always something wrong with me, something lacking. He never hit me, never raised his voice, but the silence hurt more. The way he'd look at me, like I was a project gone wrong. 3 months before the wedding, we had dinner with his parents. His mom brought up how classy his ex was. I laughed nervously. Elliot didn't say a word. Later, I asked why he let her say that. He said I was being sensitive. Again, that I read too much into things. That maybe they had a point. That night, he told me I wasn't wife material. That he wanted someone who could represent him better. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stared at him, feeling like the floor beneath me had crumbled. 4 years, and that's how he saw me. Not as his partner, but as a placeholder for something shinier, something with status, polish, whatever I was apparently lacking. I walked out that night with my heart still in that apartment. I left the ring on the table, still warm from my finger. My best friend Monica opened her door before I could knock. She didn't say anything, just pulled me into a hug and let me break. I sobbed until I couldn't breathe, shaking with the betrayal of it all. But under the grief, a quiet voice whispered, "You are not the problem." The weeks that followed felt like walking through fog. Everything looked the same, but nothing felt real anymore. I moved into Monica's guest room with a suitcase and a numb heart. Elliot's texts started almost immediately, ranging from confused to cruel. One moment he was calling me dramatic. The next he was asking me to come home. He said I was overreacting, that I was throwing away our future, but he never once said he was sorry. Every time my phone lit up with his name, I felt my stomach turn. He never acknowledged what he'd said, never that I wasn't worthy. Instead, he blamed stress, work, the pressure of wedding planning. He said his mom had concerns, and he had to take them seriously. Apparently, I was too emotional, too sensitive, not refined enough. He called me exhausting, said I made things harder than they had to be. He made me feel like I was hard to love. I started second-guessing everything. Should I have tried harder? To fit in with his world? Maybe if I'd just been quieter, prettier, more agreeable. But then I remembered how small I'd felt next to him for months, like I had to shrink to be loved. And I realized I'd already been giving him everything. He just didn't think it was enough. Monica reminded me of who I was before him. The version of me that laughed loudly, wore bright colors, danced in the kitchen. The version he gradually chipped away at with every passive-aggressive comment. She made me write a list of things I love about myself. It felt stupid at first, but it helped. Little by little, I started remembering who I'd been and who I still was. I started therapy. Best decision I've ever made. My therapist helped me unravel the mess in my head. She said, "He didn't just end it. He eroded you." Those words hit me like a punch to the gut. Because that's exactly what it felt like being slowly hollowed out until I couldn't recognize myself, and then being told I wasn't good enough anyway. I deleted our wedding website. I boxed up the RSVP cards, the save the dates, the dress catalogs. I unfollowed his family, archived the photos. It was like performing surgery on my past, piece by painful piece. But every cut brought a little more clarity, a little more distance. from the girl who thought she had to earn love, a little more space to breathe. Then one night, 2 months after everything fell apart, I ran into Elliot's sister at the grocery store. She looked surprised to see me, and guilty, said she was sorry, that she'd always liked me, but didn't want to get involved when things got tense. That word, tense, such a soft word for the way I was treated. It made my throat tighten with quiet rage. Back at Monica's, I told her about the encounter. She asked me if I missed him. I said no, but I missed who I thought he was. I missed the version of him I fell in love with. The man who made me pancakes on Sundays, who kissed my forehead. But I realized that version wasn't real. Or if he was, he didn't stick around. The guilt started to fade after that. The shame turned into anger, and the anger into resolve. He'd made me feel like I was disposable, but I was starting to feel solid again, rooted in something real, myself. I stopped wondering what I'd done wrong, and started asking why I'd stayed so long. Because I loved him, yes, but I also thought he was my only shot at love. He made me believe I was lucky to have him, that no one else would want someone like me. That was the lie I carried the longest. But now, standing here months later, I know better. The final straw didn't come from Elliot. It came from Daisy, his perfect new girlfriend. Monica had seen them at a gallery opening downtown. He introduced her as an upgrade to someone they both knew. An upgrade. That word burned itself into my chest, as if I were a version he'd outgrown, as if I'd been a placeholder until something better came along. I didn't cry this time. I didn't even flinch. I just sat with Monica at our favorite bar, sipping a cocktail and listening. To her, described Daisy, she was everything I wasn't, apparently. Refined, connected, ambitious. And somehow, that made me feel lighter instead of smaller. Because suddenly, it was so obvious. It was never about love. It was about image. Elliot didn't want a partner. He wanted a reflection of who he wished he was. Someone who made him look better, not feel better. Someone to show off, not to grow with. And once I stopped playing that role, he turned cold. He said I changed, like that was a crime. But I didn't change. I just stopped pretending. I'd spent months bending myself into shapes to be chosen. He never once tried to meet me halfway. The moment I had needs, preferences, opinions, I was suddenly too much, too loud, too emotional. He didn't want a wife. He wanted a prop. And when I stopped acting, he discarded me. The most humiliating part wasn't the breakup. It was realizing how long I'd lived for his approval, how many pieces of myself I'd silenced to keep the peace, how I confused control for care, gaslighting for guidance. He didn't just doubt my worth, he rewrote it in front of me, and I let him, for so long. That was the betrayal that cut deepest. A week later, I got an invitation to his engagement party from a mutual friend who thought I should know. They were moving fast, like we'd never even happened. I stared at the invite for a full minute, then calmly tore it in half and threw it away, not out of bitterness, but because it meant nothing to me. He could have his shiny new life. I had my peace. Still, the hurt lingered like a bruise, not because I wanted him back, but because I had once loved someone who saw me as disposable, because I gave 4 years to a man who looked me in the eye and said I wasn't worthy of being his wife. I kept hearing those words when I looked in the mirror, until one day I didn't. I was standing in front of my closet, trying on a new dress for a work event, when I caught my reflection and smiled, genuinely smiled. I looked confident, sharp, alive. For the first time in forever, I saw a woman who didn't need anyone's permission to take up space. I whispered it to myself like a prayer. I was never the problem, and I wasn't. His rejection wasn't about me, it was about control, about him needing to feel bigger by making me feel small. But I'm not his mirror anymore. I'm not his clown, his project, his punching bag. I walked away. I chose peace, and that was the moment I got even. After that night, I stopped checking his socials. I deleted our pictures from my phone, every last one. No dramatic post, no passive-aggressive quote, no goodbye text, just silence. Because nothing says I'm done louder than walking away in peace. I didn't owe him closure. I owed myself a new beginning. He tried to bait me a few times. A thinking of you message on a random Tuesday. A photo memory he sent of our first vacation. As if nostalgia was a reason to ignore the damage. As if memories could unring a bell. But I didn't reply. Not once. Because silence is a language too, and I spoke it fluently now. Friends would mention him in passing. How he seemed off lately, distracted. One even said he looked like he hadn't been sleeping, but I didn't ask questions, didn't bite. I'd spent enough time being curious about a man who never once stayed curious about me. I had nothing left to give that story. There's this strange grief that comes, not when something ends, but when you realize it never truly began, that the person you loved wasn't real. He was a version you created in your mind, a projection. You dressed in loyalty and potential, and now, standing in the ruins of that fantasy, you can finally see the truth without flinching. I moved out of the apartment we once shared, found a little studio near the river with sunlight sunlight and silence, started sleeping through the night again, started eating like food could actually nourish me, started smiling without guilt. It felt like waking up after a long, restless dream. And for once, I wasn't waiting on him to save me. I cut off his friends who stayed neutral. I unfollowed his cousin who posted both sides matter nonsense. I stopped explaining my side of the story because the people who mattered didn't need proof. They saw the quiet hurt, the subtle shifts, the way I shrank around him without even realizing it, and they stayed. I didn't have a dramatic meltdown. I had quiet mornings with strong coffee. I had long showers where I cried without needing to explain. I had late-night walks where the cold air felt like freedom. Grief didn't leave all at once. It leaked out slowly, but with every drop, I got lighter. I got clearer. I stopped trying to fix my reflection, stopped blaming myself for his lack of love, because the truth is, his rejection was a reflection of him, not me. And once I saw that clearly, I felt unshakable. I wasn't broken. I'd just been bending for too long, and now I stood tall, alone, whole, and finally, free. The last message he sent, I left on read. No response, no closure, just the quiet finality of no more, and that was enough. Not every story needs a dramatic ending. Some just require you to walk away without looking back, and that's exactly what I did. There's something sacred about starting over. No big announcement, no makeover montage, just the quiet, relentless act of rebuilding, day by day, breath by breath. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I just wanted to feel safe in my own skin. Again, and that meant starting from the ground up. I found a job that didn't make me feel small. Bosses who said thank you and meant it. Coworkers who didn't ask if I was too sensitive when I spoke up. I brought lunch from home, walked to work, took long showers without being rushed, started journaling again, not to track progress, just to remind myself I was still here. Monica stayed my anchor through it all. She never said, "I told you so." She just showed up, with iced coffee, candles, playlists. Sometimes she'd just sit next to me while we said nothing and everything at the same time. She reminded me I wasn't alone, even when I felt like I was. I made peace with silence, stopped filling it with scrolling or noise, let it stretch around me like a blanket. I'd sit by the window, legs tucked under me, listening to the world, move on without him in it. It was strange at first, but slowly it became beautiful. Some nights I still dreamed of him, but the dreams changed. He stopped being the hero. He became a blurry background figure, a voice I didn't need to hear. And when I woke up, I didn't ache the way I used to. I started saying no without guilt. No to plans I didn't want. No to people who drained me. No to the version of me who begged to be enough for someone who never deserved her. And with every no, I made space for the life I wanted. I met people who didn't flinch when I told the truth. People who said, "I see you," and actually meant it. I wasn't looking for love. I was just looking for peace. But sometimes peace brings love with it. Quiet, steady, patient. I dyed my hair without asking anyone's opinion, started painting again, wrote terrible poetry and posted it anyway, reclaimed every part of me that had been silenced. I wasn't trying to reinvent myself, I was remembering her, the girl who laughed too loud, loved too hard, and deserved better. One morning I looked in the mirror and didn't flinch. My eyes looked clear, my shoulders relaxed. There was no voice whispering, "You're not enough," only a quiet, steady knowing. I made it, I survived him, and I'm never going back. I hadn't seen him in almost a year, not in person at least. I'd heard things, through Monica, through mutuals, that his new girlfriend left him, that his job was hanging by a thread, that he was telling people I changed, as if healing was betrayal. It happened at the grocery store of all places. I was reaching for a box of tea when I heard a voice say my name like a question. I turned. There he was, hair a little thinner, eyes a little duller, holding a frozen pizza and that old familiar smirk. He looked surprised, maybe even a little stunned, like he hadn't expected me to look so calm, so untouched by his absence. He said I looked different. I told him I was. Then he started talking, fast, nervous, rehearsed, trying to sound casual, but his eyes were begging. He asked if I had a minute to talk, said he'd been thinking about things, that he didn't mean what he said, that he was under pressure, that he missed me. I let him talk, watched his mouth move like it used to lie. When he paused, I said nothing, just raised an eyebrow, waited for the part where he apologized, but it never came, just excuses wrapped in nostalgia. He asked if we could maybe grab coffee sometime. I smiled, small, polite, cold. Then I saw her, his mother, standing at the end of the aisle like a ghost. She waved, hesitantly, walked over like we were old friends. She said she missed me. That, nobody's been able to calm him down like you did. I nearly laughed. That same woman who once said I wasn't polished enough, who called me too emotional and too ordinary, now pretending I was family, now asking if we could talk sometime, just us girls. I looked at both of them, two people who had once crushed me without blinking. I told them I hoped they found peace, that I wasn't angry anymore, but I wasn't coming back. Not to him, not to her, not to that version of myself who begged for approval, and I walked away without looking back. In the parking lot, I exhaled like I hadn't in years. My hands were steady, my breath was light. I sat in my car, hands on the wheel, and whispered to myself, "You're free now." And for the first time, I believed it. The apartment was small, but it was mine. Sunlight spilled through the windows each morning, touching the walls I painted myself. The couch wasn't fancy, but it was soft, and there were no cold stares or silent treatments here. No one correcting how I spoke or what I wore, just peace, the kind I used to beg for. I filled the shelves with books he said were a waste of time, watched movies he called boring, burned candles he said gave him headaches, my space, my rhythm, my healing. Some nights I cried. Grief doesn't vanish just because you leave. But other nights I danced barefoot in the kitchen, a glass of wine in hand, smiling for no reason. Work became more than survival. It became pride. My boss noticed my drive, my ideas. I got promoted, twice, started mentoring the new hires. The woman who once questioned if I was ambitious enough was now presenting at company conferences. Funny how quiet confidence sounds when it finally finds its voice. Friends I'd drifted from reappeared. They never said, "I told you so," just opened their doors and their arms. Monica was my rock. She stayed up with me through every relapse into doubt, helped me paint the kitchen and assemble furniture, and reminded me, daily, that I was never the problem. I started therapy, not because I was broken, but because I deserved to understand my pain. We talked about patterns, about how love isn't meant to feel like walking on eggshells. We talked about forgiveness, not for them, but for myself. I even started dating again, slowly, carefully. A man named Noah, kind eyes and warm hands. He asked questions no one ever asked me before, listened, really listened, told me I was enough without ever needing proof. One night, he looked at me across the table and said, "You're not like anyone I've ever met." And I didn't flinch, didn't shrink, didn't explain. I smiled and said, "I know," because I did, because I finally saw it too. I saw him again 7 months after the breakup, at the grocery store of all places, aisle 7, near the coffee. He looked smaller somehow, not thinner, just deflated. The confident man who once called me not wife material was now scanning sale tags and pretending not to see me, but I saw him, clearer than ever. He tried to smile, said, "You look good." I nodded, polite, but nothing more. No spark, no ache, no temptation, just a quiet peace, like hearing the final note of a long song. He asked if we could talk sometime, maybe catch up. I said I was late for dinner, and that my husband was probably waiting. That was the moment I knew. The moment I knew I'd really healed. Not because I found someone new, but because I didn't need to look back. I didn't want closure. I didn't need revenge. I just wanted my life, the one I built from rubble. Later that week, he texted, said his girlfriend had left him, that he missed me, that he was lost. I didn't reply, not out of spite, but out of clarity. Some chapters don't need sequels, just a clean ending. I stood by the window that night, watching the rain trail down the glass, my wedding ring cool on my finger, a symbol not of ownership, but of survival, of rising, of choosing myself. I used to beg for someone to see me. Now I look in the mirror and see a woman who chose peace, who rebuilt herself, who said I'm not his clown, who finally whispered, "I was never the problem." Let them laugh, let them gossip, let them underestimate me. I got even by thriving, by loving right, by being free.